I was always the kid who fixed things nobody noticed were broken. Loose drawer? I'd tighten the runners. Squeaky door? I'd oil the hinges. Grandpa used to call me his quiet mechanic, which, coming from him, was the highest honor imaginable. He wasn't a sentimental man. The kind who wore suspenders unironically, said, "Ain't," with pride, and used WD-40 like cologne. But he noticed things. Especially the things people tried to hide. And in my family? There was a lot worth hiding. My parents never really talked to Grandpa. Not unless they needed something. A new car? He'd co-sign. House needed repairs? He'd show up with a wrench and a sandwich, because he knew they wouldn't feed him. I remember sitting on the porch with him while Dad shouted on the phone inside about some real estate deal going sideways. Grandpa would just hum, roll his eyes, and mutter, "Man buys sand, complains it ain't water." They didn't understand him. Didn't want to. To them, he was just a grumpy war vet with dusty boots and outdated morals. But to me, he was the only person who ever asked how my welding school was going without adding, "But you still thinking about college?" He didn't roll his eyes when I told him I was working part-time at a garage to save for my own shop. He patted my back like I'd just told him I won a Nobel Prize. That mattered. A lot. See, my parents always had a plan. For me. For my sister. For the whole family, really. Dad ran a failing insurance agency and walked like he owned Wall Street. Mom was queen of suburban manipulation, throw pillows, PDA gossip, and perfectly passive-aggressive Facebook posts. My sister? Went to some overpriced arts program in New York and still managed to believe she was underappreciated, despite having her rent paid, her phone bill covered, and a trust fund from our parents, just in case she wanted to travel to find herself. I got none of that. And I wasn't even mad about it anymore. By the time I turned 25, I'd moved out, rented a tiny place above an old bakery, and worked night shifts at a local fabrication shop. Welding, grinding, building things that held weight. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked the honesty of it. My hands were always calloused. My phone rarely rang. And I'd visit Grandpa every other weekend, bringing him black coffee and parts for whatever lawn mower he was rebuilding for no reason. He'd always nod like I was the only person on earth keeping time. Then he passed. No big dramatic goodbye. Just didn't wake up one morning in that creaky old house with the cedar smell and wall calendar stuck on May 2009. I found out through a voicemail from my mom. Her tone wasn't sad. Just transactional. Your grandfather passed. The will reading is Tuesday. We'll swing by after. Don't wear anything weird. Click. No. How are you holding up? No. Do you want to say goodbye? Just a heads up, like she was reminding me to pick up milk. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, engine off, before I cried. Quietly. Because grief sneaks up on you when you're the type who fixes things. You're so used to making things right, it stings double when something happens you can't repair. Then came the will reading. It was held in a cramped legal office that smelled like old coffee and dust-covered law books. My parents arrived in matching navy blue outfits, like they were auditioning for a commercial about smug entitlement. My sister wore sunglasses indoors and kept texting someone about energy healing. I showed up in boots and my best flannel. Grandpa would have appreciated that. They didn't even acknowledge me. Not even a nod. They were too busy smiling, like Christmas came early. You could see it on their faces. Finally, they were going to cash in on the old man's land, the house, the savings account he never talked about but they knew existed. And I sat in the corner, feeling out of place, like a delivery guy who'd walked into a family meeting by accident. Then the lawyer walked in, opened the folder, adjusted his glasses, and said something that made every muscle in my neck tense. He looked straight at me and said, "Mr. Garrett, let's begin with the section addressed to you." My dad actually laughed. Like out loud. "Why him?" He chuckled. "That must be a mix-up." The lawyer didn't even blink. He turned the page. "Look back at me." Your grandfather's words, not mine. Read this to my grandson Eli first. If they're already scowling, good. And just like that, those smug smiles? Gone. The lawyer cleared his throat, flipped open a letter written in my grandfather's impossibly blocky handwriting, and began reading aloud. To Eli. The boy who brought me coffee without being asked. The one who showed up even when he wasn't invited. You're reading this first because you were the only one who ever saw me, not as a wallet or a relic, but as your grandfather. And for that you deserve to hear the truth before the vultures start flapping. Dead silence. Mom blinked twice. Dad shifted in his seat like someone had just turned the thermostat down to Arctic. The lawyer continued. I never had much use for polite lies. So I'll be honest, I knew they were circling. I knew the moment my will was read, they'd be waiting with calculators in hand. But you, Eli, you never asked for a dime. Not once. You just came by and fixed my fence when it sagged. Changed the oil in the truck even when I said it didn't need it. You even sat through that awful tuna casserole your grandma used to make and pretended it didn't taste like drywall. The lawyer looked up and added, Your grandfather had quite a tone. I smiled, despite the lump in my throat. Then came the line that made the air go thick. So here it is, I'm leaving the house, the land, my savings, and the cabin up north, to Eli. It hit like a dropped wrench on concrete. Dad sputtered. I'm sorry. What? The lawyer didn't even flinch. There's more. They'll say you don't know how to manage it. That you're too young, too blue-collar, too modest. Ignore them. They never lifted a finger unless there was applause. You worked in silence. That's the kind of man I trust with my legacy. Mom gasped, and for the first time in my life, it wasn't fake. This is absurd. Eli is a welder. I could practically hear the lowercase w. The lawyer raised a brow. Ma'am, your husband and you both signed the will as witnesses 5 years ago. Do you not recall? My dad looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. He said that was just a draft. Well, the lawyer replied, flipping a few pages. It was notarized. And there are 3 identical copies. I assure you, it's the final draft. My sister finally spoke, voice dripping with disbelief. So I get nothing? After all I did for him? What exactly did you do? I asked before I could stop myself. She snapped her sunglasses off like it was a duel. Excuse me? I mean, you didn't visit. Not once. Not even when his hip gave out. I was busy. Art school is exhausting. I turned to the lawyer. There's more, right? He nodded. To Natalie, my granddaughter, I leave a printout of her last 10 Instagram posts with a note that says, This is why I didn't trust you with a key. I had to cover my mouth to stop from laughing. To my son, Dale, and his wife, Teresa, you had more than I did growing up. Education, opportunity, and a father who paid your mortgage twice. But entitlement rotted your character. So I leave you with nothing but the memory of every ignored phone call and unopened letter. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until that last sentence landed. There was no screaming. No chair throwing. Just a cold, stunned silence. My parents stared straight ahead like someone had pressed pause on their entire worldview. The lawyer neatly folded the letter and placed it back in the folder. If you have any objections, you're welcome to file them. Though I'll note, the will has already gone through probate. The house is yours, Eli. So is the cabin. So are the accounts. I didn't move. I couldn't. Not because I was in shock, but because for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Like someone had left a light on in a room I didn't know I'd been waiting to enter. The lawyer gestured toward me. If you'd like, we can go over the inventory next. There's quite a bit, some land deeds, tools, vintage car titles. My dad stood abruptly. This is garbage. We'll contest it. Mom followed, grabbing her purse with the urgency of a fleeing socialite. We'll see you in court. I finally spoke. Sure. But you might want to reread the part where you signed off on it. They left without another word. But my sister lingered. Just long enough to whisper, You don't deserve any of it. I looked her in the eye and said, I didn't get it because I deserved it. I got it because I was there. And with that, she turned, heels clicking like punctuation marks on a sentence she thought would end differently. I drove out to Grandpa's house the next day. Alone. No entourage, no dramatic music, just the hum of my old truck rattling its way down the dirt road lined with maple trees. The kind of trees Grandpa used to tap for syrup before declaring it was too damn much work for glorified sugar water. The house looked exactly the same, weather-worn, stubbornly unpainted, and standing tall like it knew the whole town was watching. But this time, it felt different. Like it was waiting for me. I walked up the porch steps, paused, and checked under the third plank, the one Grandpa always swore was for emergencies. The spare key was still there, duct taped to the underside like it was 1995. Of course it was. The door creaked open, and the scent hit me like a memory bomb. Cedar, engine oil, black coffee, and a hint of mothballs, a combination no candle company would ever replicate, but one that screamed home to me. I didn't rush in. I stood there, soaking in the silence. No TVs blaring, no passive-aggressive comments from Mom, no tension hanging in the air like cheap cologne. Just stillness. Grandpa's coat was still on the hook. His boots were by the door, laces untied like he just stepped out to check the mail. On the kitchen table sat a crossword puzzle, half-filled, a pencil laid neatly on top. He'd left life in progress. I wandered through each room, half expecting him to be around the corner with that raised eyebrow and a dry comment like, "Took you long enough." But the only voice I heard was my own thoughts, and for once, they weren't self-critical. They were curious. In the garage, everything was organized to the inch. Tools hung by size, oil-stained rags stacked in a labeled drawer. On the far wall was the same metal sign he'd always had. Measure twice, curse once. And there, tucked beside his old welding mask, was a yellow envelope with my name on it. I froze. Not because I was scared, but because part of me wasn't sure I was ready for more of him. I opened it anyway. Inside was a single page. Kid, if you're reading this, it means I went out the way I hoped, quietly, with no fuss. Now don't let this place rot into a shrine. Use it. Liven it. Fix things. Let the floor creak. Let the roof leak now and then. That's how you know it's real. And don't sell the cabin. It's haunted, but mostly by fish I never caught and cigars I wasn't supposed to smoke. Oh, and check the attic. There's one last thing I want you to have. It ain't valuable, but it's true. That was it. No teary goodbye. No over-the-top wisdom. Just a reminder that even in death, Grandpa didn't do drama. I climbed up to the attic, a space I hadn't been in since I was 12, and swore I saw a raccoon holding a wrench. It was dusty, but not untouched. Someone had been up there not too long ago. In the far corner, beneath a drop cloth and a warped cardboard box labeled "Stuff not for garage sale," I found it. A photo. Me and Grandpa. I was maybe 10, holding a socket wrench like it was Excalibur. He had one arm around me, and his other hand giving the camera a middle finger. Classic. Behind it, a small wooden plaque. Burned into the surface with a soldering iron, in his unmistakable block letters. This kid showed up. I sat down on the attic floor, dust settling around me like snow, and just let it hit me. He didn't leave me a fortune to gloat. He didn't do it to spite my parents. He left me this house, this memory, this message, because I showed up. Because I came back. Because I saw him. And he saw me. For about 2 days, I lived in quiet denial. The kind where you clean the same counter twice and pretend your phone isn't vibrating like a jackhammer in your pocket. I turn it face down. Silence the buzzing. Turn off notifications. Still it glowed. They had found their new battlefield, the family group chat. It started innocently enough. A message from Mom titled, "Family Adjustments Red Heart." "Hi Eli. We're all still a little in shock. Grandpa's will caught us by surprise. Maybe we can have a civilized chat soon. After all, family is what matters." I didn't reply. Then Natalie dropped in with a message that could have curdled milk. "You know this is insane, right? You're not even equipped to handle all that property. You barely passed high school shop. No punctuation. Just venom. My phone buzzed again an hour later. This time from Dad. We raised you better than this, Eli. That house was supposed to stay in the family. You know what your grandfather was like. He probably forgot to update things. That one made me laugh. He signed the will. They all did. Still, I said nothing. And nothing, apparently, was louder than anything I could have said. By the third day, the tone shifted from confused and condescending to threatening and desperate. Natalie sent a voice note, which I didn't even open. My mom followed up with, "We'll make this right. Let's all sit down. No lawyers." Then, of course, came the legal letter. It wasn't from their lawyer. It was a draft Mom copied from Google, filled with bolded phrases like rightful beneficiaries and unjust enrichment. They even threw in a line about emotional distress, which, considering my parents once forgot my birthday while planning a cruise for Natalie, was rich. I finally replied. One sentence. "You're welcome to try, but Grandpa knew what he was doing." Then I left the group chat. The moment I tapped leave conversation, I felt it. Like setting down a bag I didn't realize was full of bricks. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to convince them. I had already won something far more valuable than their approval: peace. Still, the messages didn't stop. They just rerouted. I started getting messages from random numbers. Friends of my parents. Distant relatives. One lady named Cheryl who once held me as a baby and felt that gave her the right to guilt-trip me into selling the cabin so everyone could get a fair slice. I ignored them all. But then came the one text that nearly cracked me. It was from a number I didn't recognize at first. No name. Just a short, quiet message. "He talked about you. A lot. Said you were the only one who listened." I stared at that message for a full 10 minutes before I replied. "Who is this?" A minute later, the reply came. "Tom. Neighbor across the road. I mowed his lawn when his hip gave out. Thought you should know." That hit harder than all the insults combined. Because it reminded me, I wasn't the only one who saw Grandpa. Other people saw him, too. And they saw me, now. And the next morning? That's when I saw the newspaper. Right there on the local front page, below a headline about the county fair and a goat named Jeff, was Grandpa's obituary. Written by me. Because I submitted it the night I left the group chat. I'd kept it simple. Joseph Garrett, 87, passed peacefully in his home. A veteran, mechanic, and lover of strong coffee and stronger opinions. Survived by family, though his legacy lives on in the hands of the one who showed up. The calls doubled after that. One from Natalie screaming, "How dare you use the obituary to embarrass us?" Another from my mom saying it was unfair to put private family business out in public. I didn't reply to either. Instead, I walked to the garage, opened Grandpa's old notebook, and flipped to the last page. In thick marker, he'd written, "They'll yell. They'll flail. Let them. You. Keep building." So that's what I did. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Mom showed up unannounced. I was in the middle of rebuilding the porch steps. One of them had rotted through, and I nearly broke my ankle walking out with coffee that morning. Grandpa would have called it a character test. I called it poor timing. I heard the tires crunch on the gravel before I saw her. Silver SUV. Perfectly waxed. Parked like she was afraid the house might get dirt on it. She stepped out in heels, on gravel, which told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't here to reconnect. She was here to perform. "Eli," she said, smoothing her blazer like she was preparing for court. "We need to talk." I kept hammering. "Now's not great. Porch is angry." She sighed. "I'll be brief." I gestured to the other step. "Sit if you're brave." She didn't. "Of course not." "I talked to a friend," she began. "She's in real estate. She says the house and land could easily go for 900 grand, more if you fix it up. And the cabin? That lakefront property's worth a fortune now." I raised an eyebrow. Is this the part where you ask me to sell everything and split it? Her smile tightened. Not split. Just a reasonable share. You wouldn't be where you are without us, after all. That sentence hit like a punch wrapped in pearls. I'm exactly where I am because of you, I said. Just not in the way you think. She pulled out an envelope. Thick. Too neat to be casual. I want to make this right, she said. Let's end the drama. You keep the house and cabin. We'll take a settlement. $850,000. I actually dropped the hammer. You're offering me my inheritance, to keep what was already left to me? She blinked, surprised I wasn't impressed. It's more than fair. To who? To everyone. Think about it, Eli. You can buy yourself a better place. Something modern. You could even go back to school. Get a real degree. There it was. The slip. The mask always falls eventually. I looked at her, this woman who once told me she didn't have time to attend my trade school graduation because Natalie's boyfriend was in town, and I said the one thing she wasn't ready for. No. She laughed. Not a joyful one. A sharp, brittle sound that sounded like someone trying to cough up their pride. You'll regret this. I shook my head. No. I regret letting you convince me for years that I had to earn your approval. She stared at me, trying to find some crack to slip into. A moment of guilt. A flicker of weakness. But all she found was sawdust on my boots and a man who wasn't budging. She shoved the envelope back in her purse, turned, and walked to her SUV without another word. But as she opened the door, I added one final line, not shouted, not cruel, just clear. Tell Dad he should have visited more often than tax season. She didn't slam the door. She didn't peel out of the driveway. She left slowly. Like someone realizing the keys they always held didn't work anymore. I finished the porch that afternoon. The new step creaked a little, just like the old one. Felt right. Later that night, I sat on the back porch with a beer and Grandpa's notebook on my lap. I flipped to a page where he'd scrawled. Some people think legacy is money. But real legacy? That's what they can't take from you. I looked around. The stars were out. The air smelled like pine and old tools. My phone was blissfully silent. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to feel happy. I didn't expect to see Natalie again. Not after the group chat exit. Not after the obituary. Not after Mom's SUV stunt. But there she was, standing at the edge of the driveway in a denim jacket that looked barely worn, clutching a coffee like it was a peace offering and a shield. I was pulling weeds. Not metaphorically. Actual weeds out by Grandpa's side garden where tomatoes used to grow like weeds themselves. She didn't walk closer. Just stood there for a minute, watching me work. You're really living here, she said. I dusted off my gloves. Pretty sure that's what inheriting a house means. She didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth twitched like it wanted to. I brought you coffee, she said, holding it out like it might bite her. Black. No sugar. I took it. Sipped. It was awful. She saw my face and smiled for real. Okay, so I guessed. Good guess, I muttered. Tastes like betrayal and vending machine. We both chuckled, the tension cracking just enough to let something human through. She sat on the edge of the flower bed. The same one she used to run through as a kid when Grandpa warned her not to. We both remembered that. You could see it in how carefully she avoided the edge now. I wanted to hate you, she said finally. Still kinda do. I raised an eyebrow. Appreciate the honesty. But also. She trailed off, chewing on her words. I think I just hated that you were there. And I wasn't. You could have been, I said quietly. Could I? She snapped. Dad always made me feel like visits were charity work. Like we were doing Grandpa a favor just by showing up. I didn't argue. Because she wasn't wrong. But she also wasn't right. You didn't need permission to care, I said. You just needed time. And you always said you didn't have any? She looked down at her nails, picked at one. I didn't come to fight, she muttered. or ask for anything. Then why? She hesitated. Then reached into her jacket and pulled out something small. A photo. It was the same one I'd found in the attic. Me and Grandpa. Socket wrench. Middle finger. Laughing. I found this in my old yearbook, she said. He must have slipped it in during one of our visits. I stared at it. Same photo. Same crooked smile. She looked at me then, really looked. No pretense. No performance. He loved you, she said, like it still surprised her. He loved both of us, I replied. But only one of us showed up. We sat in silence for a minute. The wind rustled the trees. A squirrel scolded us from a branch. Finally, she stood. I don't want the house. Or the cabin. Or the money. Then what do you want? She thought about that. Then said, to not be the person who ignored him anymore. That one hit. Because for a moment, I saw not the golden child, not the Instagram-filtered life, not the girl who rolled her eyes through every family dinner, but my sister. Just a person. A little lost. A little late. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. Then start by visiting the cabin, I said. It's still haunted. She snorted. I'm not falling for that again. Hey, I warned you last time. That fish nearly took your arm off. That made her laugh. Loud and real. She tucked the photo back into her pocket, took a deep breath, and said, thanks. For not slamming the door. Yet. She waved without turning around. Tell Grandpa I said hi. And then she was gone. Not redeemed. Not forgiven. But maybe, trying. That night, I sat on the porch again. Stars out. Porch light humming. Grandpa's notebook on my lap. I flipped to a page I hadn't read yet. If she comes back, and she might, don't shut her out. Life's too short for grudges. But long enough to make people earn their way back. I closed the book and smiled. He always knew. I made the drive to the cabin 2 days later. It wasn't exactly a luxury retreat. The road up was more pothole than pavement. The trees loomed overhead like nosy neighbors. And the lake, while peaceful, smelled vaguely of wet leaves and old fish. But to me, it was perfect. The place hadn't changed a bit. Same cracked window pane Grandpa refused to fix because spiders need a view too. Same rusted mailbox shaped like a trout with a chipped lip. Same firewood pile he always claimed was stacked for winter, even though it was mostly decorative at this point. The key was still under the frog statue. Ceramic. Missing one eye. I'd painted it when I was 6. Grandpa never replaced it. Inside, the cabin was equal parts cozy and chaos. Fishing rods in every corner. Books with bent spines. A calendar from 2011 still pinned to the wall with a note that read, Don't trust July. No context. Classic Grandpa. I lit the fireplace, made a pot of the worst instant coffee known to mankind, his favorite, and sat in his old recliner. The one with duct tape on the armrest and a permanent imprint of his backside. I looked around, expecting the piece to hit me like it had at the house. But something tugged. Like I hadn't found everything yet. That's when I remembered the trapdoor. Tucked beneath the rug, barely noticeable unless you knew where to step. Grandpa once told me it was for emergencies, which in his world could mean anything from tornadoes to inconvenient guests. I pulled back the rug and opened the hatch. Dust flew. My nose instantly regretted the decision. A wooden ladder led down into a small crawlspace. Not creepy, more like forgotten. I climbed down, phone flashlight leading the way. There, against the wall, was a battered toolbox. Big. Heavy. The kind that made your hands dirty just by looking at it. On top, taped with yellowing Scotch tape, was a note. Last job. All yours, kid. I opened it. Inside was a project. Half built. Half drawn. Plans scrawled on napkins and old blueprints. A welding table lamp. Or maybe a chair with a built-in clamp system. Knowing Grandpa, it was both. And next to it? A second notebook. This one newer. Leather-bound. His handwriting was shakier but still firm. I flipped through the pages. They weren't lists. Or instructions. Or even rants about kids these days. They were letters. To me. Pages and pages of thoughts. Memories. Advice. Some practical. Some emotional. Some hilarious. Don't use cheap wire. In welding or in women. Keep your coffee black, your tools clean, and your promises cleaner. You don't owe anyone your silence. Especially when you've earned your voice. And this one, near the end. You ever wonder why I left you everything? It's not because you're perfect. Lord knows you ain't. It's because you were present. You showed up. You asked questions. You listened. You laughed at my dumb jokes. And you never once made me feel like a burden. That's rare. Don't let the world beat that out of you. I sat there for a long time, in that dusty crawl space, with tears streaking down cheeks I didn't realize were wet. My hands clutching the notebook like it might disappear if I blinked too long. He hadn't just left me things. He left me himself. His voice. His heart. His trust. I carried the toolbox upstairs, placed it next to the fireplace, and opened the window. The breeze rolled in, cool and earthy. Somewhere in the trees, a loon called out. The lake shimmered. It didn't feel haunted. It felt full. That night, I slept in Grandpa's cabin for the first time in years. No nightmares. No noise. Just the creak of wood and the soft rustle of leaves outside. When I woke up, I made a list. Of repairs. Of things to build. Of plans. Not to sell. Not to flip. But to live. Because this? All of this? It wasn't an inheritance. It was a second chance. A month later, I got one last letter. Not from Grandpa. From a law firm. Turns out, he'd owned more land than I realized. Some parcels near the lake, others tucked just outside town. Quiet investments he never talked about. And with it, a posthumous note, likely written months before he passed. If they ever ask how you got all this, tell them you earned it. Not with charm. Not with degrees. But with time, elbow grease, and showing the hell up. Now go build something they'll never understand. So I did. I registered the cabin as a weekend welding retreat. Started teaching small classes. Hosted community nights. People came from all over, not because it was fancy, but because it was real. And as for my family? They watched from a distance. Still circling. Still confused. But this time, they weren't circling me. They were orbiting a legacy they never bothered to understand. And I just kept building.